What is up, guys? You got NotTheWorst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today we are revisiting the endgame PvE guide for Awakening Dark Knight. Now, there haven't been a ton of changes since the last video, 6-7 months ago or so. Almost nothing except for the large changes that happened to the hit rate and accuracy, evasion interactions, that sort of thing, which did open up some opportunities for overall crystal usage and tweaking add-ons, since accuracy comes from a ton of sources now, a ton of it from different sources. We don't necessarily need it in the add-on section. And then, of course, if we tweak add-ons, that means that skill rotations can be adjusted accordingly as well. So we're going to dive into those and check each of those sections out. Do want to remind you, I have a running spreadsheet that I always keep all of these updates on, so that is linked in the description if you want to check that out. So as I make tweaks and changes, obviously I'm not going to do a video every time something little changes. I try to do one every 6 months if there's no major changes, and then do one if there's a large major change. But any other like small things or a new grind spot added or something you do a little bit differently, you'll be able to find in that spreadsheet as it's updated, rather than waiting on a new video. So with that said, let's first get into the crystals and take a look. Okay, so first thing you're going to notice, especially if you've seen the previous iterations of the spreadsheet compendium here, is we have a lot less crystal options because it's not as in-depth to change them all up, since accuracy has been consolidated. You'll note we don't have any accuracy-specific crystals in. We get enough off of the sources from Macalods and the Glorious Ocrods being in there, so we don't really need it. The only thing that, for the most part, is going to be different from spot to spot is if it's a more back attack-dependent spot than kind of a normal spot, right? So something like Tungrad Ruins, you're not really caring about back attacks at that spot and just deleting things very quickly. But two, you're also not going to score a ton of back attacks as compared to a place like Trolls, for instance. Ton of back attack happening there. Darkseeker's Retreat, Gyfin, things like that. So any spot you have like roughly 80% or more of your attacks are actually back attacks, that's where you're going to swap out. You see the normal setup having the Corrupted Crystals. You'll swap those out for the Mysterious Darkness Crystals. Aside from that, they're completely uniform. It's just the best in slot crystals that you can have. 2 Rebellious, 2 of the Glorious Ocrads, 2 Valor gives us our max crit without even having to worry about what buffs are running, although the new Elixir setup makes that kind of superfluous. Macalods, obviously just insane AP, accuracy, stamina, everything we could want there. We got our Decimation for extra AP and some back attack damage, and then we have an open slot there where we're going to stick a Power Crystal just to get an extra 5 AP, and then of course Gihren's Tear, just the absolute best crystal for PvE, period, and there's really no contention for that. So these builds are identical to each other, aside from whether you're using that Corrupted slot for the increased extra damage or the back attack. And then I did also this time include one for the broke boys that can't afford real crystals, I guess we'll call them. And again, as you can see, there's not much to this. It's pretty straightforward. I put in ones that aren't like ultra expensive. Decimations are super achievable. And then if you can't get your hands on Macalods because their abilities are more specifically, not necessarily with their abilities, you can't buy them, and maybe you just don't have the harmonies yet because you just got into it recently, just swap all those for power crystals. Literally just stack up as much AP as possible. We have the dual red fangs in there, which are AP and crit anyways. It could be another power crystal, whatever. If you didn't want the second red fang, might as well have it. Glorious Ocrads are very cheap, and Corrupteds are dime a dozen as well. The only other thing, I do have Gihren's Tear listed in here. When I was screenshotting this, I just didn't have a Gihren's Crystal on me at the time to put in, but you could obviously easily put this with the lower grade one. A Gihren's Crystal is totally fine, or if for some reason you have like a Bong Water Tier, you could definitely run that if you wanted to here, just until you get, you know, kind of your thing going. So because these are endgame PvE guides, I don't typically dive into like budget type builds for it, but it came up often enough that I figured I'd include the broke boys in there to figure that out. Caveat to this, though, there's some amount of gear dependency, and I think I noted, yeah, I did note that at the top of the spreadsheet as well. You do need to kind of pay attention because this assumes, again, these are endgame gear guides, so this assumes endgame level gear. You might actually need to slot an accuracy crystal, a Jin Viper, or a Visionary Elcar, something like that, if you're seeing misses. So don't go into a spot and just stack all this AP setup or whatever, or slam every brutal decimation and everything else that you can, or like you have a power crystal, here's 5 AP, and you're sitting there looking at misses popping up on your screen. You're doing that wrong. You definitely don't want to trade not hitting the mob at all for 5 AP. That's a terrible trade. That 5 AP doesn't work when you miss. So don't miss is the first thing. Whichever spot you're grinding, obviously a ton of spots are like completely irrelevant, even with like mid-tier gear as far as accuracy goes, but not all of them. Tungrad Ruins is fairly up there. Obviously Crypt is the big one there that you may want to look for that. So if you do have misses, obviously this would be the first one to drop, and then I would actually drop, if you needed more for whatever reason, I would, 1, second guess where you're grinding, and 2, you could drop the decimation. But if you are endgame geared for it, complete non-issue. You're not going to be slotting accuracy crystals at all. So there you have it for the crystals. Let's head on into the add-ons and see how they're going to tie in with the rotations. All right, into the add-ons, you are also going to see that this has been condensed pretty drastically from previous iterations as well. We used to have different add-ons for different spots based on what skill rotations we were running. But again, with these changes, we can kind of solidify it to where you kind of just have a setup where do the mobs have a down attack function or do they not? And the reason for that is because we want to use the down attack modifier if we do. So common ones endgame wise would be like Tungrad or City of the Dead. That would also impact goofy places like Abandoned Monastery. You can KD mobs there, Star's End. Whatever. So you can fit those in. Similarly to those, if you are at a spot like, let's say, Giants, although I don't really consider Giants endgame, like what this guy's designed for. Giants, you have human damage, so you could slot that in to fit it there if you needed to. So they're not really that different from each other. And obviously, as I always give the caveat, the skill add-on is set up to a specific skill rotation. So if you change some add-ons because you like this one here, whatever, make sure the rotation makes sense there. It's not that big of a deal since the large add-on revamp, we'll call it, from last November of 2023, where you have access to basically all the add-ons you want, and once you get through a single rotation, you just infinitely have everything up. So as a general rule of thumb, you want to have like 2 sources at least of each add-on that's relevant to you. So pretty standard for most everything. Minus DP on Spirit Legacy doubles up with the skills. Minus DP, we also have that on Shattering Darkness to later be applied. The reason for Shattering is the AoE size is very large, and you can also pivot the camera pretty easily to make sure you're hitting all the mobs. Spirit Hunt's kind of the key one here, and you note that's one of the different ones between the normal and the down attack version here. We have back attack and critical hit damage on it versus the down attack and critical hit damage modifier on the down attack version, and then we pick up back attack on Seed for both of them, so they'll have it either way there. The reason for that is because this cooldown is incredibly low. It's like 2 seconds or 3 seconds. 2 seconds, I think, off the top of my head. It's incredibly low cooldown, so you essentially always have this up. If you override it with a larger skill, it's not a problem because this is essentially at your fingertips every single time. And you'll see in the skill rotation as well that we have it listed twice in there to make sure that gets maintained. The big takeaway from these, there's nothing like game breaking or like blow your mind. You can kind of do anything you want with skill rotations, or excuse me, skill add-ons these days, and you're mostly fine just because of how they work now and getting access to all of them. But the big change is you can see we're not running any plus accuracy and we're not running any minus evasion. You may need that, and you may want to actually run that before you consider changing your crystals if you're in a scenario where your gear is getting misses at the spot that you're grinding. So that's something to think about. You can very easily fit those in by just trimming the fat on a little something else, throw a minus evasion, throw an accuracy buff on you if you find that you do need it. If you don't need it, then well, no point in having it. So again, these are geared towards end game with it, so you shouldn't really need it in actual end game gear, end game PvE. You might, and still working on getting your gear up there, or you're running like a Tet Block Star in one of the slots or something like that. So that covers the add-ons. Let's go ahead and get into the rotation. Okay, so first thing I want to note, as always with these, this skill rotation isn't the end-all, be-all. Obviously, you can use different variations and things to get the job done just the same. This is just a nice rotation that's going to be seamless. If you want to start from the top, go to the bottom, rinse and repeat. Maybe you just recently tagged DK, you want to play it at endgame, and you don't know what you're doing with it yet. So you can start with this. Over time, as you get more comfortable with the cooldowns, you're going to start playing heads up and just actually managing your cooldowns properly, which you'll see me doing in the demonstration video at the end, rather than just pressing the exact same buttons in the same iteration, because you can get better DPS when you actually just pay attention to cooldowns. But that being said, you can follow this from top to bottom and repeat it, and you'll have pretty decent results regardless. It's just when you really want to start pushing and you get more comfortable with the class that you'll move away from that. Now, next thing to talk about, we have a couple options, it being seamless right at the beginning, as you'll see, and I have a couple notes that are in the setup there. We've got them both for the skill names, and we have icons. We also have PC inputs if you prefer it that way, so however you want to slice that bread, you got your options there. You'll see that we first have Shadow Strike / Unveiled Fate. And the reason for that is those two have very long cooldowns, and using this skill rotation, you won't have, if you start with Shadow Strike will not be back up when you go to repeat the rotation. So you would switch to Unveiled Fate. I understand not everybody wants to do that, and you want truly a seamless rotation where it's the same every single time. So if that's you and that is what you want, you can just use Wheel of Fortune instead, or Shadow Bullet, either one. Shadow Bullet being much, much quicker than Wheel of Fortune, much, much quicker than Wheel of Fortune. Both are pitiful damage, but keep in mind Shadow Bullet repositions you just a little bit, so that might mess up your positioning depending on whatever, are you standing behind a Cyclops or something back attacking or whatever the case may be. It's fine to use those to start out while you're kind of learning, so you don't have to pay attention to any cooldown times, and everything else will just line up for you. But as you want to increase your performance and your DPS, you want to move into other things. All of these skills do switch you out of your Awakened kit, so you don't have to worry about that specifically. So you can just go straight into it, and it'll get you to pre-awaken on any of those. Shadow Strike, Unveiled, Wheel, Bullet, all of them swap, so you don't have to pay attention to that whatsoever. And really all we're doing is getting access to our attack speed bonus skill. That's pretty much all we want out of the pre-awakened kit, because the damage is pitiful in pre-awakening, except for Blooming Black Rose, which is why we're going to use it. So if we do the Shadow Strike chain to start with, it's going to be Shadow Strike, Blooming, and then our Unveiled Dagger gives us our attack speed buff, which we can see there. The reason we throw the Blooming in there is because it's a quick cast version of it that goes in pretty nicely, and it's the only amount of really good damage that the pre-awakened kit has. So since we're in the pre-awaken, why not use the one quick cast version of that skill? If we do Unveiled Fate, you'll notice that I say you can skip the Unveiled Dagger, and that's because Unveiled Fate's going to apply that attack speed buff for us. So we'll just go like this. Boom, we did our Blooming right after it. This guy's got the attack speed buff already there for us, so it's going to be a little bit faster than the Unveiled Dagger. Obviously, the animation is much longer than the Shadow Strike variation. So, yeah, they come out around the same, but you're just rotating between those two. That's giving your attack speed buff with just a little bit of that extra chip damage off the Blooming. And now you get into your actual skill rotation. Pretty standard Spirit Hunt. If you recall, we put our nice little damage modifier add-ons on that, so those are going to get applied pretty much right away, and it has that low cooldown. And we're going to instantly use the quick cast version of our cluster after Spirit Hunt. So it goes directly into it. You can see she just does a quick wave of her arm and goes straight into Cluster of Despair. Something to note, there's other versions of Quick Cast depending on the skill you use it on. So that version off of Spirit Hunt also works that way if you're doing it off of Trap of a Deer for whatever reason, or Shattering Darkness. If you do it off something like, let's say, Legacy, you see she kind of spins around, and it's just a little bit slower than the other skills that I mentioned. Dusk also has the fastest version of it, so it's still a quick cast, but when you're trying to get like nitty gritty, it does it off Seed is the little bit, see the pivot around. It's actually just a hair slower than doing it off of Spirit Hunt, Trap of a Deer, Dusk, and Shattering Darkness. Any of these skills have the quickest version of it. Is it the end of the world if you use it off of them? No. Are you going to have to if you're playing heads up with your cooldowns? Yes. You're going to end up using the other version at some point. Just don't slow cast it. Is the name of the game there, and then you're fine. So after our cluster, we're just going to go Spirit Legacy, and we're instantly going to go into a quick cast of Dark Nebula, and then pretty straightforward from here. Just the Shattering into its two flows, Seed into its flow. We're going to have Spirit Hunt back up. It's going to reapply our stuff for us. We can Spirit Hunt and then Grip of Grudge. Okay, so that's kind of the bread and butter of it. We get the attack speed bonus, then we DPS through that chain, and then we get to the kind of the tail end where this really depends on where you're grinding. For instance, I don't even get to Grip of Grudge. Most of the time grinding at like Tungrad Ruins or something. They're going to be dead way before that. So it kind of depends. It's also going to be the point where you realize that your nice little bundle of 7-second cooldowns, your Legacy, Nebula, Seed, and Shattering, the big four there, those guys are not off cooldown so that you can go directly into them. And we also want to be able to reapply your attack speed buff. So we come up with, a lot of people call it filler, which I will just call it that. I hate the term filler skills, but whatever, the community knows what we're talking about if we call them filler skills, even though I just hate that terminology. You have a ton of options here. It doesn't that matter. After the hit rate changes, the Spirit Blaze functionality got quite a bit better. It used to be pretty miserable using the full Spirit Blaze, and I was more a fan of just hotkeying the flow one only, as you can see there. I still do that sometimes if I need it rather than the full one, but the full one doesn't feel really terrible after they changed the number of hits on it. It doesn't have that like weird super ultra laggy delay, so you can use that one. That's totally fine. For the damage is pretty good, especially for the time that it takes on it. Touch of Exploitation is functionally better because the fourth hit lands, but the time it takes to get to the fourth hit is a little bit slower than using your Spirit Blaze option. Obviously, all of these are worse than just using the hotkey Spirit Blaze. It's just a matter of, you know, what you're trying to do. The benefit that you have with the Touch of Exploitation is you're frontal guarded. It also recovers some HP if that's relevant to you, so that can obviously, you know, be a key component there. Last part that I mentioned there is Twilight Dash as needed for back attack positioning or a quick engage. So you're either coming up to the mob, you can obviously Twilight Dash into them, or if you know you're grinding a spot and they turn or whatever, you can go into Twilight Dash from there. Also didn't note it there, but you know, if the mob turns on you, you can pivot your camera and Trap of a Deer. I would just use Twilight Dash over that option because it'll actually deal damage. And Trap of a Deer doesn't. So that's just something to keep in mind. So if you go through that, then you will be able to rinse and repeat back to the top of it. So we'll just go through as if we do the whole thing, and I'll show you from here. And then you see we can tie it right back in. So now we switched, right? We switched over to the Unveiled Fate that round. And then we're just going to do the exact same thing. And then this time switch again. So you get the idea. So that can just go endless from there. Something that I do note in the spreadsheet, if you do take a look at that, something to think about is if you're on your E or Z buff, then you're going to have the timing of things like BBR, Blooming Black Rose, and Cluster, since those are the long ones at 10 seconds. You need to pay attention to those a little bit more, because you're going to fly through your skills a little bit faster. The timing may be off, especially depending on what your total attack speed is at the time. If that happens, you can potentially just do a touch all the way through, and you can then just add the Flow Spirit Blaze if you want to stay seamless, as I noted all of this in the spreadsheet, so you can check that out if you do run into that issue. But that's the skill rotation. As I said, it's a really great starting point. You can mold it and make it your own. Make sure you adjust your add-ons accordingly if you decide to do that, and then ultimately this is to get you to a point where you're just, this is kind of the skeleton or the outline of what you're sort of doing, and you're going to play a little more heads up as you get more comfortable with the class, because it's really about those powerhouse skills, the 7-second ones, being off cooldown. You don't want to give up an opportunity while Legacy, Nebula, Seed, and Shattering have all been off cooldown already, and you're sitting here doing this because you want to go back to the beginning of your rotation first, and keep it seamless. It's a starting point, and then over time you'll get just the feel of get the attack speed buff, and then just damage dump as best you can. Pay attention to your cooldowns, and get more comfortable with it. If you don't want to do that, you can use this, and you're going to pull pretty good trash loot. You're not going to be competing with like Lua or anything like that, but you'll pull really nice top-end trash, pretty close to top-end trash loot, just using this and kind of getting by. It's just a thing that you can tweak to get even better. So there you have it for this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to like it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you get notifications when new videos go live. And if you'd like to catch me playing live, there's a link to my Twitch page in the description down below. You can jump on over there and drop a follow so you get notifications for that as well. I'm going to end it out with a little demo video, killing a little Cyclops and then some tongue grind as well, so you can kind of see the skill rotation in action. Again, it's a skeleton of it, and you'll see me using cooldowns kind of heads up and not necessarily in the exact order that you see them on screen. So thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.